Chapter 6 of Officer 666. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Roger Moline. Officer 666 by Barton W. Currie and Augustin McHugh. Chapter 6. Officer 666 on patrol. Michael Phelan had been 2 years on the force and considered himself a very fly young man. He had lost something of his romantic outline during the 6 months he pounded the 3rd Avenue pave past 2 breweries and 4 saloons to a block, and it was at his own request, made through his mother's second cousin, District Leader McNaught, that he had been provided with a saloonless beat on 5th Avenue. A certain blue-eyed, raven-haired nursemaid, who fed a tiny millionaire with a solid gold spoon and trundled an imported perambulator along the east walk of Central Park, may have had something to do with Patrolman Phelan's choice of beat, but he failed to mention the fact to his mother. He laid it all on the breweries and the temptations they offered. Humble as was Michael Phelan's station on the force, he was already famous from the wooded wastes of Staten Island to the wilds of the Bronx. Even the graven-featured chief inspector permitted himself to smile when the name of Michael Phelan was mentioned. He was a fresh, rosy-cheeked, greener-than-grass probationary cop when fame came to him all in one clap and awoke a thunderous roll of laughter throughout the city. It was his first detail on the Lower East Side in the precinct commanded from the Eldridge Street station. The time was July and the day was a broiler. He was sitting in the reserve room playing dominoes with the doormen and mopping his forehead with a green bandana when the captain sent for him. "Phelan," said the captain shortly, "there's a lady dead without a doctor at 311 Essex Street, 3 flights up. Rear. They've told the coroner's office, but all the coroners are busy. The corpse is a lone widow lady with no kin, so you go up and take charge, and wait for the coroner." Officer 666 tipped his cap with military salute and set out. Turning the corner into Essex Street, he met plainclothesman Tim Feeney, who stopped him and asked him where he was bound. Michael Phelan explained, and then said, "Tim, if you don't mind, will you give me a tip? What do I do when I get up to that flat, and how long will I have to wait?" "You'll have to wait, Mike," replied Tim Feeney, "till the coroner gets good and ready to come. When you get to the flat, don't knock. Walk right in. Then sit down by the bed and wait. Be sure you keep the door shut and let no soul in till the coroner arrives." "It'll be powerful hot, and I'm perishing of thirst now," said Mike. "Take off your coat," said Tim, "and send a kid for a can of beer. When you hear the coroner comin', slip the can under the bed." Tim Feeney went on his way with his hand over his mouth. Patrolman Phelan had missed the twinkle in Tim Feeney's eye, and a few minutes later found him sitting beside a bed with his coat off and a foaming can on the floor by his chair. On his way up the steep, narrow staircases he had met a boy and sent him for the liquid refreshment. He had instructed the lad where to deliver the beer and had gone quietly in to his unpleasant vigil. The door he opened led directly into the bedroom. He had glanced once at the bed and then looked away with a shudder. Perspiration fairly cascaded down his flaming cheeks as he tiptoed to a chair and placed it beside the bed. He placed his chair at a slight angle away from the bed and then fixed his eyes on the opposite wall. When he heard the tread of the boy in the hall, he made a pussy-footed dash for the door, took in the growler, shut the boy out and buried his face in the froth. He was in better heart, but still mighty uneasy when he wiped his mouth on the back of his fist. Somewhere in the flat a clock ticked dismally. Through two small open windows puffed superheated gusts of air. The muffled clamor of many voices in strange tongues sifted through the windows and walls, but served only to increase the awful stillness in the room. Despite his efforts to the contrary, Phelan stole a glance at the bed, then looked away while his heart stopped beating. There was a naked foot where he had seen only a sheet before. Maybe the wind blew it off, he tried to tell himself, but something inside him rejected the explanation, and he felt an icy finger drawn up and down his spine. Again he plunged his head into the capacious can and succeeded in reviving his heart action. More minutes of dreadful suspense passed. A leaden silence had filled the sweltering room. Even the voices of the tenements had died away to a funeral murmur. Battle as he did with all his will, Phelan's eyes were again drawn from their fixed gaze upon the wall, and what he saw this time induced a strangling sensation. 3 toes had distinctly wiggled. He withdrew his eyes on the instant, and his shaking hand reached down for the can. His fingers had barely touched it when an awful shriek rent the air. The shriek came from the bed, and it was followed by a second yell and then by a third. Michael Phelan did not open the door as he passed out. It was not a very strong door, and it went down like cardboard before the impact. The third shriek awoke the echoes, just as Officer 666 was coasting down the stairs on the seat of his departmental trousers. His departmental coat and his departmental hat were in no way connected with his precipitate transit. A raging Polish woman brought these details of Michael's uniform to the Eldridge Street station a little later. Likewise, she preferred charges against Phelan that come under the heading of conduct unbecoming an officer and a gentleman. It was a tremendous trial, in the course of which the deputy police commissioner, who sat in judgment, barely missed having a serious stroke. It was adduced in evidence that Officer 666 had entered the wrong flat, the coroner's case being 1 flight up. But while the whole town rocked with laughter, Michael Phelan failed to see the joke, and his hatred of Precinct Detective Tim Feeney never cooled. That he got off with a light sentence of 1 day's fine did not in the least improve his humor. He knew he was a marked man from that day, and it was all his mother could do to urge him to stay on the force. In the course of time, however, the sting had worn off and the young patrolman learned to smile again. His hollow cheeks had filled out amazingly during the period of the brewery beat, and on that late autumn day when he stepped into the pages of this narrative he looked mighty good, not only to the raven-haired Rosalind O'Neill, but to a host of other pretty nursemaids who were wheeling their aristocratic little charges up and down the avenue. Nor was Michael Phelan at all unconscious of this as he sauntered along the broad pavement and gracefully twirled his baton. His chest jutted out like the breast of a pouter pigeon, and he wore the solemnly self-conscious expression of a peacock on parade. When he came to the great white square mansion of Travers Gladwin, he paused and studied it shrewdly with his eye. It was one of the most important functions of his patrol to study the fronts of all unoccupied dwellings and see that every window was down and every door was closed. First he looked into the areaway of the Gladwin home, and then his eye traveled up the wide balustraded stoop to the ornamental bronze doors. "What's this?" he gasped in astonishment. "Sure, I read in the papers only this morning that Travers Gladwin was in Egypt. 'Tis a bold thief who'll go to the front door in broad day, so here's where Mary Phelan's son makes the grand pinch he's been dreamin' on this 6 months back and gets his picture in the papers." End of chapter 6. Recording by Roger Moline.